Welcome to One Insight. My name is Rich Litvin. I grew up in London and I now live in LA. And this is a podcast for extraordinary top performers and their coaches. You see, I've coached some of the most successful and talented people on the planet. I can see what most people cannot see, and I dare to say what most people wouldn't dare to say. And what I know about success is that on the other side of it, it can be incredibly lonely. You can feel more of an imposter the more successful you become. And when you're the most interesting person in the room, you're actually in the wrong room. Clients who are more successful, more intelligent, and wealthier than you need your support more than they know and more than you can imagine. I coach around insight. Life looks one way, something happens, and the world looks different, and your entire world changes. It can happen in an instant. And this podcast is called One Insight because a single insight can change everything.
Richard is a consultant and a coach who's worked in tech for 20 years. He works with fast-moving business leaders who love complexity. And he asks me, where do I find these kind of interesting people that I love to work with? Well, I tell him there are two answers to that question. Number one is you can look for them and find the communities they hang out in. And number two is you can create the communities that they hang out in. And it's easier than you think. There's a moment at the end of the coaching where he goes, and that's the moment I know we're there. That's the moment when he's had his insight. Next, he gets in his head a little bit about how am I going to make this happen? And I have to just calm him down. But it was the moment he knew, oh yeah, I want to do this. The insight came and we're there. That's why I love to coach around insight. The moment they have an insight, their world changes. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Rich.
I am glad you're here with me. You're a member of Project Kairos, which means this is my community of people who've done all sorts of extraordinary things before coaching, and now they want to take their coaching practice to the next level. And I'm honored that you said yes, come on and we'll play. And how can I help you today?
Yeah. Well, you can go all sorts of directions, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think the thing, right now I'm feeling that my practice is taking off. I'm getting momentum. Takes a while, right? To start with, you do a lot of, I call it shoe leather marketing, right? You're just getting out there, meeting people, connecting. So there's a certain sense of momentum. And I'm just thinking, and I've really got confident now in, partially due to Project Kairos, right? Actually, that I do good coaching, right? I do great consulting, and it makes an impact. And so, and I'm really aware, I can be in these rooms that I wanted to be in, right? I can be in, the executive suite, which is where I've actually spent a lot of my time anyway, but in this slightly different role, I can be there. I guess the question that comes to my mind right now is like, how do I spend more time in the right circles, right? It's all very well meeting somebody at the school gate or, a friend that I've known for years and asking who they know and that kind of thing. But I kind of think there must be places where my kind of clients hang out, or rooms where I need to be I'll be the dumbest person in the room, and that'd be a good place to be, right? And I'm just not sure, do I need to, should I be looking for those places, or do they exist, or how do I find them?
I think there are two answers to that question. It's a great question. I love that your business is beginning to fly, and now it's time to get into more interesting rooms. One is to find them, and the other is to create them. And both are interesting and valuable to have a look at. Which one comes to mind first? We'll do them both.
Well, I've tried to create some. I've tried various things, various stages. I don't think I've had a lot of success in that, if I'm honest. I've done some things. I run a occasional thing here in Paris, invite people along. Sometimes I get a bunch of people, sometimes not that many, but it's still fun. but they're normally people who are, in my network, or people who have, potential clients or current clients or whatever. So it's great. So I can create rooms, and they're not necessarily as big as I might want them to be, but it doesn't feel that I'm kind of getting the next level, a different set of people, I suppose, in those. They're people I already know.
Well, let's have a look at that. You told me a minute ago that what's happened in your coaching practice, it's like push starting a car when your friend says, hey, can you help us? And four of you get behind it and you're all pushing and it's very slow because there's a lot of inertia. And then it gets momentum and it starts to move faster and faster. And then you almost fall over because the engine kicks in and it takes off. And it's been happening with your business. You felt this momentum beginning to build, and it can feel really slow at the beginning. So I put it to you, it's the same game for creating communities. You've been doing it a little bit. You've been practicing with some of the clients and so on. And sometimes it happens. There's a lot of people, sometimes not so many people. It's just a longer term game than you think. If you're in it for the long haul, then you can relax about those tiny moments. It's like, okay, these are just experiments. This is why I call 4PC my 25-year game. We're only 5 years in. So I'm excited about what could happen in year 7, let alone year 10, year 15.
Yeah.
So I wonder what would happen if you raised the bar a little bit. If you said this was a C-suite dinner or a C-suite meeting. It's for the very high level executives you'd love to spend time with. And in the first couple of times you might do it, there might only be 2 people there. But if you do something really fun and interesting and unorthodox with them and say, hey, come back again, bring a friend, bring a colleague, you'd be surprised how that would build over time. And how does that one land, first of all?
Yeah. On one hand, it's really exciting on one hand. And on the other hand, it's like, it's going to be so much work to get all these busy people to actually lock in on, I can imagine I have like 3 of them, right? And then like 2 of them would drop out the day before because they've got some urgent thing. So, and I know that I have a bit of a tendency to kind of always look for the shortcut, right? And so anything that looks like it's a lot of work that in the end might not create something, I might shy away from, right? Or I tried things, right? Remember early on in Project Kairos, I tried to organize a dinner, and that didn't quite take off the way I expected, shall we say.
Tell me more.
I basically said, let's put together a dinner with 4 extraordinary leaders. I actually played a pretty high game. I said, you're going to have to pay to come along. This is skin in the game.
Yeah.
And started to ask around about who would be the kind of incredible people that should be at this dinner. And I got some names, and I probably could have got more, but I think I was just finding that it was just hard to lock in even on a date with the few people that I'd already got some interest from.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's just me not pushing through and getting stuck in.
Probably. Because I can't promise how many will come to the first one or to the second. But if you know that on the 3rd Thursday of the month or 4 times in 2020, there's a dinner that you're filling, and it's a minimum of 4, maximum of 6, and those dates are on the calendar. And then when you're in conversation, you call out for someone a real powerful commitment, whether it's they're putting some money down up front or something that will have them be committed to this. I think you'd be surprised at what will happen if you start to fill into the future. If it's just one and you feel a bit of pushback, there's a part of you that's going to go, you know what, it's a bit of hard work right now. 2 people have said no, that feels challenging. And you'll pull back. That's why most people don't launch a coaching practice, because it's easy for me to say, yes lives in the land of no. The more no's you get, the more yeses you're going to get. But you get 4 no's in a row, and that feels overwhelming. You get 7 in a row, and you quit. Except we know that if you're willing to be in it for the long haul, and you are committed to building this coaching and consulting practice, the no's are just part of the game. Sometimes there's a bunch in a row. Sometimes there's a bunch of yeses in a row. It's the same with this kind of thing around creating community. The first ever event that I created was myself and Steve Chandler, and we had 30 people in a room with us. We got 15 of them there each by serving them one conversation at a time to get them in an event with us. I now have a community of 150 people who show up at a time, and I'm not coaching people to get them to come to that event. But that's because I spent 10 years almost, building communities, serving people, creating value. I'm just in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I think that idea of having 4 dates, say, is I don't know why, but that sounds like that would work, or that would be good. I think that somehow.
Well, let me ask.
Because it's only because people can't commit necessarily like to next week, right? But sometime out, they could, and it's then a choice. It's like, well, you either do it now or you don't do it.
Filling into the future.
Choice.
I don't know if you've ever done an assessment called Colby. Colby shows you how you operate in the world. So I'm really low on something called follow through. My profile is 3492. 4 is really low on follow through. That's not good or bad. It just means I'm not the guy who should ever do scheduling, put things on calendars, be sending emails to people. If I order a package from Amazon and they send the wrong thing, it's going to secretly, so my wife doesn't notice, go in the trash, because I'm never going to be the guy to go to the post office and try and mail it back. It's just not who I am.
Yeah. I'm a 4492, so I get you.
Right,
yeah,
okay,
so I hear it. Yeah.
Almost the same profile. So you find a way to set this up so you're not handling logistics. It's never going to happen if you have to handle logistics.
Yeah.
Whether that's some kind of personal assistant, maybe your partner's good at that stuff and you're not, whatever it is, it's got to not involve logistics. That's what's going to be the barrier to entry for you. It's not about them. It's, oh my God, I had to go back and forth on email 3 times to get a date. And that's just with one person. You'd be overwhelmed. It will never happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, perhaps I can just find 3 people who are kind of up for it and then say, right, we'll nail down a date that you can all do. And that can be the start of the thing. And I do have an assistant who's great at that. So
make sure your assistant handles that stuff. You should not be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do we say? You could either create the community or find the community. Let's talk about finding the community. Where do you find this community? Well, tell me more about your people. What kind? You said executives. What do you mean by executives?
Yeah, well,
CEOs.
So my background's in tech. I spent 20 years in tech, and I find that my customers, they're not always in tech, but they're often in complex, fast-moving industries, right? They tend to love complexity. They tend to so they tend to be running reasonable size organizations. They're not always massive, right? One of my clients got, an organization of 30 people, right? Other one's got hundreds, right? Or thousands. But they'll tend to be dealing with this intersection of strategy and people in this fast moving kind of technology world. And then I think the people that actually I resonate with, and I think it's in a lot of people, but actually often in business it doesn't come out, is this question of purpose, right? So often if I'm starting with execs and we don't talk about purpose, at some stage it comes out, right? Because they're getting frustrated or bored in their role and they want to do something meaningful and they've got enough money or whatever it is. But I think there are people who actually know that they want to be on a bit of a mission and create a positive impact, right? So yeah, ideally it's somebody who's in the tech sector, understands how tech is going to change, but is changing everything in our world, and wants to shape that, right, and leave a legacy.
Nice. I love that. I love that. Initially, I love the intersection of strategy and people, especially in the tech world. They get strategy. They don't often get people. They might get how to help people to buy their product, but understanding the people in the organization is often where they can struggle. But then you put purpose on top of strategy and people. That little Venn diagram is really interesting.
Yeah, and I just see it more and more actually that once you get through the first level of work with people, they're like, yeah, okay, now what's actually going to light me up, right? This is all good stuff, and I'm got the buzz of achievement, but what's going to light me up in this role? It doesn't mean changing role necessarily, right? But it means actually being a mission-driven leader in that situation.
Nice, I love that. So where do these people who love complexity hang out? What do they read? What magazines do they like to look at?
Well, the answer is if I knew that, I'd be.
Well, you do know that because you're one of them. So
yeah,
if there was a conference going on that you could get tickets to, where would you like to go to?
Yeah. Well, there's um, um, yeah.
So
I'm actually thinking it's interesting. Yeah.
I'm going to pause you because you don't have
Yeah.
to have the answer in this moment, but that's the direction to go in.
Mm.
What would, if you were going to make a list of 10 amazing conferences you could go to next year, if budget money was no object, where would you love to go? They could be in Paris or France, wherever you are right now. They could be in Europe.
Yeah.
They could be around the world.
Anywhere.
What would you love to go to? Singularity University. You know, there are some right. So
yeah, I mean, that was one that came to mind, right? I mean, and then but it's also interesting because there's also a thing, I think, where sometimes people are actually, there's two dimensions. They either go that way, right, and really go for all these events, and so I think sometimes they just like do the opposite, and they just like want to go and play tennis at the weekends, right, and get out of their heads, right? So I think there's probably two.
Well, tell me more about you.
Worlds.
Which one do you prefer to do? Do you like to just switch off completely, or do you like to immerse yourself in? Because I'm not quite your person, but I'm similar. I do. I mean, I love simplicity on the other side of complexity. That's my sweet spot. But I'm fascinated by complexity. I'm always reading, always learning, and that. So, what do you do when it's time to? Do you switch off completely? Do you go to conferences? Would you like to go to conferences?
I think I'd like to go to more. It's probably a thing I haven't perhaps done so much of. I've done a lot of like business building conferences and these kind of things, right? But that's not necessarily what my clients are doing. So perhaps just going to things just because they're interesting, rather than because they're necessarily inherently useful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would do a little bit of market research with your clients. Hey, out of the year that's just gone, did you go to any conferences? What magazines do you read? What books do you read? Or in the year ahead, is there any conferences you want to go to? And do a little bit of research, not just with your current clients, past clients too. Just reach out and say, hey, I'm curious. And see, are there any patterns? Are there any main conferences? The most fun thing I think about conferences that people sometimes miss, and I know I shared with you once before, but for everyone who's listening, find the kind of environments and conferences your clients love to go to. And you don't even have to book a ticket, because the most interesting people at most conferences are the ones sitting in the reception area while the talks are going on. Because in my experience, the really high performers go along because they're interested and quickly realize they've got this, there's too much of a sales pitch going on, or they just want to meet interesting people. And it's actually sitting outside in reception that you have all the interesting conversations.
Yeah. I did that, right? You told me that, and I did do that, and I got some good conversations going. But I think sometimes conferences aren't all. I mean, conferences, you say everyone's kind of there, and often it can feel like it's a pitch fest. Like everybody's there trying to push their business card on you and everything else, right? You don't necessarily want to be that person either.
Well, no, don't. It's the Prosperous Coach approach, right? It's interesting conversations. Hey, why are you outside? Why aren't you in the talk? Tell me more about that. What's going on? Tell me, these are two great questions. What's the big challenge you're working on for the next 20 years? And what's the big challenge you're working on for the next 3 months? They really get people talking in interesting ways, and that's what you want to start a conversation. Because at some point they say, well, what are you up to? And then you can say, well, you know what? The thing that excites me the most right now is I work with mission-driven leaders. What I've seen is that most leaders work on strategy. The ones who are really successful work at the intersection of strategy and people, but there's a group of people beyond that who, once they've had a lot of success, they realize what's missing is purpose. And so I work with leaders who understand people, understand strategy, have had a lot of success, and want a bigger mission. Now you've got an interesting conversation, because your people will go, oh, that's me, or tell me more. If they're not your people, they'll go, oh, that's nice. That's not your people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I think perhaps it's an experimentation of finding those rooms, right, and perhaps just trying out a bit more. Again, I have this filter which is like, is this going to be a good use of my day, right, and everything else, because I could do all these other things, right? I could ring up all these people, or I could write whatever it is, or And so
this is
often
where
that can limit me.
Slow it down, because this is the on Colby where you're low on follow through. You're like planning it all out now, and it feels overwhelming. What if it was once a quarter, you went to an interesting conference? Find 4 for next year. That's it. If after the first one you're energized, you might pick another one for the calendar. But if you're not, it's just one next quarter. Try 4 next year. That's it. Make sure your assistant books all the accommodation and flights so you don't have to. And show up and have some interesting conversations. But the mission isn't to enroll a single client at a single intensive or a single conference. It's over the entire year. Let's have a look back in the end of the year and see, how was that? The worst that will happen, you've been to 4 interesting conferences.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's manageable.
So for those of you who are listening, there was a moment, I didn't want to interrupt Richard, but there was a moment when he said a few moments ago, and he went, huh. It was more like this. It was, And that was the moment. That's the sound of insight. Then he went into his head to trying to plan it out, and it felt overwhelming. So we had to talk it back a little bit. But it was that moment of realizing, oh yeah, I could do this, and it could be interesting, and I wonder what that would look like. That was the insight moment. The planning and stuff will work out. We can do that, or make sure you don't do that, so someone is doing it for you. And the simplicity of just 1 a quarter, make it easy. But for those of you listening, it was that moment. I felt it. It was the when the insight came.
Yeah, and I think this distinction that just came to my mind was around, interesting versus useful, right? And actually, if you're kind of trying to do things that are useful, then it's probably going to be a pitch fest. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if it's things which are interesting, then people are there because it's interesting.
Yeah.
Which is actually which is more interesting and a more fun place to be, right? And have those conversations.
Totally. And I would even think, we mentioned Singularity University was the first one that came to mind. Do they have a group of people who are members who are in France or just in Europe?
Or London or wherever, yeah.
Yeah. What if you create a group of people, like, I'm going to create a group who are members of Singularity University and want to have a meetup just to talk about complex issues. And here's the first one I'm going to put out for us to talk about. Here's why I do this. Because I work with leaders who work in fast-moving, complex industries. It's what I love. And what I discovered is that those kind of people don't have much of a chance to just connect with others at that level, because they're just too busy running their business, or they want to switch off completely. You want to have some fun talking about complex issues and have a laugh? Here's what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, I can see that.
It is. Slow it down, one tiny step at a time, make it easy, not a lot of follow through for you. And there's some ways to both create community and find community, and then actually do the two together.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Rich.
For most of human history, it wasn't called coaching, it was called leadership. And it's what I love to do, to coach people, to lead people, and to mess with people's thinking. If you'd like more of this, or if you'd like to learn more about our community of extraordinary top performers, go to richlitvin.com/oneinsight.